So
This meeting is being recorded.
good afternoon, everybody. My name is TJ Curtis. I'm the Family Training Coordinator with Families Together, and I'm presenting Crystal Rose, who will be facilitating support groups in today's TA call. Crystal Rose is a Family Workforce Development Coordinator with Families Together. She's a parent of a child with special needs, which helped push her further into this role of family peer support. Prior to that, Chris Rose has also been a peer advocate in her own right, helping her aunts and other family members who are in additional community service organizations, helping communities and families navigate systems of care. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce Crystal Rose, who's going to provide this wonderful presentation for you. And while she gets started, we're gonna shoot out a quick little poll, just a capture of who's in the room. And Crystal, all on you.
Thank you, TJ. Welcome everybody. Hi, once again, I'm Crystal. You might have seen me before. I'm the Family Workforce Development Coordinator, and we're going to talk about support groups. I would like for everyone to just work out this poll. It really is just some basic demographic information we're going to need to conduct this TA call. And as soon as you're done, you can just submit it. So we'll just give 1 to 2 minutes before getting started so that you're not a little overwhelmed. 1 to 2 minutes for everyone to be able to complete this poll. And then I'll move into the slides. And I have a very cool icebreaker for everyone. So I can't wait to get started. As you're doing the poll, I'm just going to go over a couple of house rules. As you know, we have features in Zoom. So there's features like the raised hand feature. You'll find that at the bottom of the screen. So it will be at the bottom of the screen, similar to, it would be under reactions. And you can use the raised hand feature if you'd like to speak or ask a question. We just request that detailed questions be held until the end. We will have a Q&A in time to answer any questions that may come up. Everything that we talk about and is recorded, it will be posted to the Families Together website. All TA calls are recorded and posted to the website. And you can also use the react button to just share how you're feeling. We have the heart, if you like what someone is sharing, applause, if you agree or support something. So feel free to be interactive. We're going to make this a lot of fun. And I believe everyone is just about wrapped up with the poll. Is that correct?
A couple more people were just in the waiting room, so please fill out the poll as soon as you can. I apologize if you're just coming in. This is just to collect data on some demographics, so we can continue providing these TA calls with you in mind.
Okay.
All right, it looks like we are done.
Awesome. Okay, so and there's still some people coming in. So I would just say to those that just came in, there's a poll. We're just asking for you to complete that. It's just a couple of questions. It's very quick, probably takes 30 seconds max. And we're going to move on with the presentation today. So hi, and today we'll be talking about facilitating support groups. So I'm going to go first into our icebreaker. So the question that I have for you today is, if you could think of any food that you have eaten or enjoyed as a child that brings you comfort, a comfort food, and reminds you of home, what would that food be? And I can lead this question off. A food that I eat that reminds me of home or childhood. My family's Caribbean, they're Jamaican. And my grandmother would make, sometimes on Sundays, a huge pot of Jamaican stew peas, which is a stewed dish. It often had pork in it, and it had some other meats, and we would eat that over rice, and it was just so warm and delicious. And anytime I get stew peas, I think about home, and my grandmother left me the recipe just before transitioning, and I have not yet tried to make it on my own, but I will try it. So that's mine. Does anybody else have a food that reminds you of childhood, that takes you back to home, that's your comfort food?
In the chat, comfort food that remind from Margarita, A comfort food that reminds me of my childhood is simple: a fried egg over white rice.
Hmm. Oh, I see Gina says potato soup. Emily says my mother's homemade rice pudding in the wintertime. That sounds good.
Sunday pasta.
Not so much food, but coffee. Hispanic homes use this as a social thing, and it is very comforting. Yes, yes, I actually am familiar with that a little bit. Diana says cabbage soup. My grandmother always made it when I was sick. Aw, she's sweet. Spaghetti and meatballs, and like you, Crystal, grandma would make a big meal on Sundays. Thank you, Danny.
Mac and
Elizabeth
cheese by
says
Megan.
classic, classic. Mac and
Oh,
cheese is like
curry
a
goat.
staple.
I love curry goat.
Curry goat, yes, big ups.
Trini curry goat.
Katie chicken divan, raised donuts. I don't know about that one. I'd like to hear more about that. Okay, I see Norcia, you raised a hand. You can go ahead. Norcia, you're still muted if you're trying to speak. Okay, I think you're frozen. So when you do come back, if you do come back, if you can leave it in the chat, I'd love to hear what you have to say. And anyone else, if you're just coming in, I know there were some names coming in as we were going through. The icebreaker is foods that remind you of home, comfort foods that bring you back to childhood. Anyone else want to drop theirs in the chat or just unmute themselves and say it out loud?
So there's a couple. So on my Jamaican side, my favorite has always been jerk chicken, rice and peas, cabbage on the side, and some plantain. And but my grandmother, because I was adopted, she had a couple family recipes, but one was this broiled chicken with rosemary. She'd make with rice, corn, and I think broccoli or spinach, and it always brings me back. It was so amazing.
Nice. Like that sounds really good, actually. Who else became hungry after that description? Um, so thank you guys for participating. I hope we were able to give you some warm, fuzzy thoughts
Can you
of
hear me?
home. Oh, yes, who's that?
Norcia.
Let's see. Yeah, my mute button was not letting me go. So I
Um,
have two dishes. Just actually remember me when I was young. For my dad, it would be a good chicken soup, and for my mom, it would be callaloo soup.
okay, nice. So thank you for sharing that, Norcia. All right, so we're going to move into our presentation. So we're going to talk a little bit about support groups. Um, uh, this is just to help you develop the concept. Some of you may already been doing it. I have heard some discussions about support groups, whether it be in our coaching calls, in our lived experience cafes. I've heard some of you mention support groups that you are running. And so I do hope this presentation helps to kind of bolster the information. And also for those of you who have not yet done support groups, here we go. This is what we're going to learn today, and we'll talk a little bit about it. We'll go through the planning of support groups, structuring support groups, and building support groups, as well as assessing them. So assessing it, these are the steps in this particular order that we're going to go over. So I want to pose this question to our group that we have today. Why do we need support groups? And the word need, it's subjective, but why do we need support groups? Would anybody like to tell me?
Providing an opportunity for members to meet others that are going through the same situation to prevent isolation.
Absolutely. I love that. I see some in the chat. Before I go to the chat, does anybody want to say theirs out loud? Okay, so in the chat, I see Danny says, so we are not alone, right? Marianne says community support that understands and has similar experiences. Absolutely. Amy says to make connections, right? Layla, it's a way to know shared experiences in the community, right? Katie, people you can relate to. And Teza says the more support one can have, the better. Absolutely. This all coincides with Wendy's. Basically, all the things that was shared identifies that shared groups help to support one another. So I'll go into the slide. The benefit of support groups, it allows for a safe environment for collective self-exploration. Participants can gather new information objectively from others with similar experiences and backgrounds. Another good aspect of support groups is support groups are a safe space to unravel and discuss complex feelings. Okay, so how many of us have ever participated in a support group? You can just show me by like a raise of hands, or you can just drop in the chat as well. Yeah. And I would just like to ask, how did you feel about support, like going to the support group? Did you feel that you found people were similar to you? Did you feel different? Did you feel like, tell me about that experience, if anyone would like to share.
It felt very refreshing knowing that you're not by yourself and other people are going through the same thing, and what works for you might work. What you think would work for you might work for them, and what they work for you then might work for you. So it's like a little bit of information.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Margarita, I see your hand is up. Is it also to share or is it up from the first question? Oh, you're saying it was nice to have people to vent to. Absolutely. Yeah. So to reflect back on the experience that you guys shared and also the information that we're talking about, support groups would benefit the families and caregivers that we serve because there are some things that they will express and explore in the sessions that they sit in with us. However, there may be something more that can be discovered in the process of talking to more individuals in a support group. Having a lot of these shared experiences is like the difference between eating roasted chicken and having chicken soup. You got more ingredients in there and it kind of enhances the meal. So support groups offer a great benefit to the families that we're serving, and we're going to go into a little bit more about that. So I'm going to ask you, and how do you determine the focus of the support group? How do you determine what the support group is about? And there's no wrong answers. I'm going to go into the next slide a little bit about that, but I would like to know what do you use right now to determine the support group focus?
In our organization, we ask the members what they would like the focus of the group to be about.
Okay.
But if we don't have a lot of ideas or enough to, do the whole hour and a half of our group that we do, then we follow the family assessment of needs and strengths, and we kind of go through the questions that are on there, and if they have any questions about that, or we present. So like if one of the question of the month is about social resources, then we come up with a way that they can gather all of their social resources all in one place and explain what each services does and what how everybody works together to support them, for example.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Wendy. Does anyone else have something to add to that? Other ways that you've determined how to create the focus of your support group. Go ahead.
So we have a couple running. about to start running through our office. I think each one of us has one. So we've been told to start them the same way. So we have that group who shows up. Our plan is usually to kind of do long icebreakers, get to know each family, their reasoning for being there, and then kind of watch what the similarities are and just make that statement of this group is for you. We're going to run it so that you benefit. But our main goal, like we bring in some guest speakers and things until we get to know the group. But the main goal for us, I think, is usually to not have to run it at all. Like they come in and they're able to communicate with each other and things like that at the end. And that is kind of what we've seen in our more successful groups.
Thank you, Diana. And absolutely, I can see how that can be helpful because you get an idea of what they want from their perspective first. So I also see some in the chat. I see some people are saying they do self-care, depending on the population served, completing surveys, attend by the number of attendants, asking the families about their interest. Awesome. Okay. So here are some ways, and everyone that has spoken and has shared has touched on an element of how you can develop the focus of the support group. I've listed a few ways just to guide, to create sort of a guide as to what you can do. You can review notes and reports for trends. So as you're taking notes with the families that you're serving, what stands out as a trend? What are some things that everyone is mentioning or that most people are mentioning as either a need or a challenge area, things like that? Name and label the trends that you've identified. And so say, for example, if you go through the notes, the progress notes that you've been taking, and you see that many families are struggling with their child's IEP, then you may want to do a support group based on the IEP, so you can name it. IEP challenges, IEP, whatever. I'm just throwing words out there. But of course, you come up with something way more creative. But you would come up with a title that you want to name the trend. You want to kind of quantify it, qualify it, and put a name to it, and say this is what the trend I'm seeing is, and this is, and the reason why you want to name it is as you're creating this, you want to create it as a pathway so that you can recreate these support groups. So this is why you want to identify and put a name to it, because when you need to go back to do it again, you basically have your own formula of what you're talking about. And you can say, oh, in August, we had an X trend. We had, in July or in the first quarter, in the third quarter, this is the trend it was, and then you can name it. Then you can also conduct polls or quizzes from the families that you work with for more clarity. We started our TA call with a poll. We just needed some demographic information. Some things that you can do is you can just do a brief little poll at, in an area where you're encountering the family socially or families socially, like if it's a health fair and maybe you're tabling or something like that, you can have a brief questionnaire, maybe 2 to 3 questions to just get an idea of what they need. And for the families that you're already actively serving, you can ask their permission. If you can just ask them a few questions about some things that they need, like what some of you have already mentioned. You talk to the families directly. What can I do for you? And so these are some things that can help. But it's not limited to these things, as well as everything contributed in this conversation, that you can get an idea of what your support group should be about. Any questions about that information? Okay, great. Since we're talking about polls and quizzes, we are going to briefly share the results of the poll that we took in the beginning of this TA call. Just these are the demographics that we've collected. I see many of you are family peer advocates, and we have a few supervisors in here, so awesome. So thank you for participating in the poll. It is some required information for us. So if you have come in late and you did not get a chance to do the poll, just leave us a chat or like a direct chat, and we'll see if we can get it out again for you. Okay, because we do need to have that information. Thank you so much. Okay, so now that we're talking about what do we want to identify when we're identifying trends, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into that. Trends are identified as a general change over time. They must be identified by more than 50% of your population and be a sustained issue that warrants attention. So if you see something standing out, but let's say you serve 10 families, but only 2 of them have an issue, but you see it, you think it's a very important issue. It may be an issue, but it's not a trend. It has to be a trend if it's served by more than, if it's identified by more than half of the people that you are currently working with, that would constitute it as a trend. Then we want to consider the impact. How does this trend impact your families? Can you find a core need that is unaddressed in your town or community? The reason why I go over impact is because as you're identifying trends, you may find that there are more than one. And when you have more than one trend, now you need to determine how to prioritize them. If you can only do one support group at a time, some people have a large enough organization that they can run multiple. But if you are focusing on one, which is, best practice, if you're focusing on one support group at a time, you want to see which trend has the most impact. So which trend presents itself the most on the families in the community or town that you're serving in? Then you would like to identify some resolutions. What are some ways to address the trend and the issues you've identified? And how does this group affect change? So this group refers to the support group. So you're hosting the support group, but you want to have an end goal in mind. So you're creating the beginning from the end goal. The resolution is, and you can even write this out as you're outlining how you're going to begin your support group. I would like them to feel more confident. Now, the overall goal that you're generating is not necessarily a guarantee. Things can change. As you're working with people, human behavior is just different. It's different people with different perspectives, different experiences. Things can change. And I suggest you go with the flow of the conversations that are happening in the support group. But you can have an idea of how you want things to flow. What is the overarching goal that you want for these families that you're serving? And how is the group going to impact the trend that you are identifying? So before I move to the next slide, any questions there? Okay. So going into the quizzes and polls. Quizzes and polls should include relevant demographic questions. Demographic questions can include the following, which would be like the location. Now, depending on the guidelines, not all of these questions can be asked, and I would suggest strongly that you touch base with your supervisors to see what is allowed and not allowed in terms of what demographic information you can collect, depending on what you're doing. You can only do zip code. For some, you don't need the zip code, but you might just need the region. And things like that. So you just have at least one identifying factor for location, age, gender, the need, the dates. So that's the times around when whatever said challenge has been experienced. You can and the reason why you would probably need some dates is it helps you understand if challenges are seasonal. So like one of the things that I've identified is typically by, let's say like February, March, there's usually an uptick in parents trying to get tutoring and support for their children. They've already gotten through the first quarter, they've gotten a report of what their child has been doing so far. And that's when they start recognizing, okay, my child is at that point, the school starts sending out letters, letting them know if their child is at risk for, advancement. And then that's when they want to do tutoring or to do any kind of services to support their child's education. There are some times when, if you look at dates, you'll see that certain things stand out at a certain time. Polls or quizzes can be anonymous, and they allow for the individual to feel more comfortable disclosing this information. Because it's not necessary to sort of pinpoint it to the person. You really just want to know a general idea of the existence. So the anonymity of it really helps a person to feel more comfortable giving you this information, and it's not necessary for them to give their name. So before I move on to group structure, I just wanted to ask a question about the polls or quizzes. Did anybody, how do you feel like the information is relevant? Did you have any questions about any of and I'll go back to the slide. Excuse me, any questions about any of the information or suggestions here? Like I said, it's not limited to these suggestions. These are just the ones that might help to bring the structure to how you generate your support groups. And if you want to jot this down, also, this is a good time to just take some notes. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. So structuring the group. When creating the group's structure, which is, and as you see here, I'm going to go through these different elements of the group structure. You want to start with, what is the appropriate number of members for my group to have? General guidance, like best practice, is groups with members of 15 and under are often easier to manage. However, groups should not be conducted with less than 3 people. Anything less than 3 people is like a coffee chat. Less than 3 people, that is a meeting, it's more private, and it's not necessarily considered a group. So when you're getting like registrations in and you start seeing people sign on as you're getting closer and closer to the day, you would want to identify the total number. And then the reason why I gave this number of 15 is anything more than 15 becomes hard to handle. When you have more than 15 people, these are 15 life experiences, 15 different perspectives, 15 or more. So if you have 20 or more people, it really becomes a lot to manage. Now, experienced people who do support groups or even workshops or teaching or anything like that, they may be able to handle that well. And not that, there aren't people that can't handle it, but it just becomes a lot. Even as experienced as you are, it just becomes a lot to handle the conversations, the personalities, the experiences, the expectations when you have more than 15. So we just guide somewhere around 15 to cap. If it's more, that's okay, but just be mindful it will increase the level of output for you as the family peer advocate. Then, how long should my support group be? So understanding the schedule and the needs of your family are so important here, because a working mom may not be able to meet at midday, but a stay-at-home mom, maybe she can. So this kind of goes back to the demographic information. Based on the families that you're serving, what schedule would work best for them? So this structure is identifying how you're putting this together, the shape of your support group. And last but not least, what resources are needed for the group? The group's meeting in the morning or evening, food is a good resource and incentive Virtual groups may need materials to be digital and to be emailed ahead of time. So and I've seen this before, if you're hosting a support group like online, people may say, can I have the slides at the end? Or, they may just request for resources like any documents to support what they've learned for the day. Those are some of the things that you kind of want to have ready if you're doing a support group. If there's something that they've discussed and they want to learn more about, they may ask you for some resources. So you just want to have them available just on hand in case. But it's not necessarily that you're doing like a structured presentation, because this is not a workshop, it's a support group where their voice is what's primary in this experience, and you are just supporting what they have to share, talk about, and experience and explore. Okay, and then, like I mentioned, if it's an in-person support group, you may want to have some snacks, some like, Dunkin' Donuts, donut holes or something, coffee or water, something for them to enjoy, a little bit of an incentive for them to come out. People may have had a long day, and, if they have to go somewhere again, and as you know, we are serving families, so there are children to be mindful of. The children may need an extra snack. So these are some of the things that may encourage them to come, because it's like, oh, okay, I'm coming straight after school time and I didn't get to get my child their after school snack. You have donuts and fruit snacks there? Cool. Then I'll just bring them straight. I'll come straight after school. Things like that can help to make it easier for the families that you're serving. Now we're going into audience building, which is pretty much like getting the word out. Now, I'm going to go over what I have listed, and then at the end, I'm going to ask for some interaction and participation about how you guys have done it. But so what I have here is to build the audience for your support group. It's good to conduct outreach within the community. And what that outreach can look like is talking to the library, going to other events, like you might go to a health fair, you might go to other things that other nonprofit organizations may be doing, like a back to school drive, a fundraiser, and just letting them know we have a support group. This is what's happening in our area, in our region, in our town, in our community, and this is what we're doing. Do you mind spreading the word? Getting, if you have anyone that you think would like to be registered, this is how this would work. You can also contact current families and ask for their participation. They may have friends. They may have people who are in a similar situation to them. However, those people may not be using family peer support services at the moment, but they may have an experience that would benefit from the support group, and they would want to share that with their friends or associates. You can also partner with other community-based organizations that serve similar populations. So some people might be in an organization that only offers family. Some people may be in an organization that offers a variety of types of support and services. And so within your own organization, you can network with other departments to get other people to sign on to your support group. If you do have an organization that pretty much has one focus, you can see any partners. Like, for example, I have seen in my experience as an advocate, the agency that I worked with focused on family support. However, there was referrals to the WIC office. WIC, which is like food support for new moms. And so we can send our flyers over there because the WIC office often encountered many families, many parents. And so they would be able to then grab the info and then share it. So you want to kind of consider what are some other community-based organizations that serve populations that might meet the same topic or focus that my support group offers, that I can kind of just collaborate with, or even just ask them, hey, can I leave you some flyers about something that we're doing for the families? So I want to ask you, outside of what I've mentioned, what are some ways that you've done outreach for your support groups?
I want to say schools.
Okay, schools are good. Do you want to tell me a little more about it?
Back to school nights, like especially right now, and reaching out to school social workers, psychologists, they're always looking for, resources for parents.
Absolutely. Schools are an excellent resource. Anyone else with any suggestions or ideas from experience? I see in the chat we have from Alicia, we send letters to the school, resource centers, counselors, open house libraries, put it in laundromats, parks, and town halls. You guys are doing the work. But absolutely, those are some ways definitely get information out there. Did anyone else have anything different or unique that you were thinking about sharing? Okay, Narcia says open house at schools. Absolutely. Absolutely. And don't forget the community, like religious organizations, whether it be like a mosque or a church or a synagogue. You want to consider they often have youth and they like to partner as well with other community organizations. And you have social media. Your social media presence can also help. I would just be mindful of what ways you're using it. Like if the organization that you're with might have a social media page, you may want to post it on that, not necessarily a personal one. So things like that. That's a way to build the audience or the collective for your support group. So you can take it to the streets, like someone mentioned in the chat. That outreach can include email campaigns, flyer distribution, word of mouth, connection. A happy family will share their experience. Don't hesitate to ask them if they know anyone who will benefit from the group. Also, it's better with friends. It's so much more fun with friends. And then partnership. Community-based organizations near you can be a great help, just like you. They may also need to reach a larger population and implement workshop groups and the like. So like you said with the schools often love to get access to the families and develop that relationship. And you already have relationship with many of the families. And so the schools need you as well as you need the schools. So that is a great partnership that I would encourage you to develop if you haven't already developed one. Okay, so assessments. Once your support group begins to come to an end, we often encourage you to assess the support group, see how well it has done. And so it's important to gather data on what you've learned. This is where the assessments come in, and they can be any of the following. They can include feedback forms, satisfaction surveys, pre-registration for next sessions, and Q&A. So I'm going to go into a little bit of each of these. If you, how many people have either seen or have used any of these forms of assessments? Any of these types of assessments? Who has either used or seen any of these types of assessments? Okay. Okay, so feedback forms are great, satisfaction surveys, pre-registration. Yes, Wendy, you can go ahead.
I have used when we were doing COVID. My video keeps going in and out. When we were doing COVID, I would do the groups through virtual, and I always had a satisfaction survey at the end so that they could tell me how satisfied they were with how the group was proceeding and if they had any suggestions that they wanted to put on.
Absolutely. And I love that you shared that, because that's the most beneficial part of having the satisfaction survey. Anyone else? So I'm gonna go into them a little bit. So feedback forms versus satisfaction surveys. I'm so glad that you brought that up, Wendy, because we're going to focus a little bit on this. Surveys and feedback forms are different in that surveys ask a series of questions. They can tend to get more in-depth and detailed, and they can be used for general research, basically, like they gather data. So a poll is like a form of surveys. Surveys can be way more detailed, and sometimes surveys is not really an on-the-go thing that you can really make. Surveys are they're a little bit more in-depth. So feedback forms, they're typically a little shorter. They gather insight and opinions versus facts and data. So this is gathering from the person, how the person feels, the person's insight, the person's opinion from a specific group of people. The goal is to understand the experience and assess the satisfaction, and it identifies areas of improvement. So feedback forms are gold for you if you're doing support groups, because you want to know what are the things that the families feel like they are missing, as well as what are the things that the family has enjoyed the most. The survey might tell you how effective the support group was. So it might tell you what is some of the information the families feel they don't have, and what is some more information that I could provide, or should I scale back on any information or elements that I'm having in this particular support group. So both serve an excellent purpose. And it depends on what it is that you need and how your support group is structured, or how you're identifying the efficacy of it. Okay. Oh, actually, before I move on, any questions about surveys and feedback forms? If you
Can I
have,
ask? Sorry,
Yeah,
I was wondering
sure.
what the time frame is that you might give for, so if like a new person has been with you, is it that you would ask a new participant versus one that's been doing it for a while with the group, or any specific guidance on that? How often?
How often? You can, I would say typically it's done at the end, and it's done one single time. However, if you have a support group that's going on for an extended period of time, you may want to do this. I would say it would be relative to the extent, to the expanse of time. So say, for example, your support group lasts for 6 months. You may want to do it like right in the center at a 3-month mark to see how far have we come. And then this way you can make changes and improvements over the remaining 3 months. So you can factor it in that way. You may want to alternate surveys and feedback forms. So you may want to do a survey sometime in between. However, the feedback is at the very end, or vice versa. You may want to do a feedback sometime in between and the survey at the end. Another thing that I would say could indicate, may not necessarily be time, but the interaction of the participants. If the participants look uncomfortable, if they look dissatisfied, or you start seeing there's a drop off in attendance, I would then suggest, regardless of the time, let's pull out surveys and feedback forms and figure out what is going on. What's happening here? Are we reaching you? Are you okay? You want to gather some information. So those are some of the things that I would say, but it's kind of nuanced, and it really is nuanced to knowing the length of time, how often you meet, and how many people are in it, things like that. Does that answer your question? Awesome.
It does, thank you. I was curious to know if there's a difference that you've noticed, and you can answer this after, with regard to virtual versus in person with feedback. But that's something you can get to later if you have time.
No, we can definitely talk about this now while we're on the topic. In person, and that's a great question. I've noticed that you don't often get feedback before you're done. In person, people feel more encouraged to participate. People feel way more encouraged to pull you to the side and say whatever it is that they need to say, whether it's, oh, I was uncomfortable here, I was uncomfortable there, or I really like this, can we do this again? So I notice in person, you may garner way more information. I encourage support groups to be in person, but I do know with the way the society is, especially post-pandemic, we have moved on to virtual. So with virtual, it does require that extra pull. So if you're using platforms like Zoom, I would encourage you to use the tools like the poll, to use links, QR codes, things like that to kind of get people to finish this type of information. QR codes, especially because they can just use their device. If they're on a computer screen, for example, they can use their phone, scan the code, do it on their phone so that they're not confused trying to figure it out in the computer while they're in the Zoom and everything is going on at the same time. I've done that where people put the feedback form at like the very end of the thing and I'm like, wait, what did you say? I'm filling out the form and I'm listening to you and I'm stuck. Like, so if you put it on their phone, at least as it's ending, they can start to wrap they can start to wrap it up, even after the call has ended on their phone and just hit submit. So there's that. I see in the chat, Alicia says we use Google Forms. Yeah, that's a great way to do it, using the Google Forms. And Layla says, in experiences with which in experience with this, which have been most effective? Okay. I find, depending on what you need, it really depends on what you need. So if you're noticing, if you want to engage, if you want to identify if everybody is doing well, they may be quiet and you don't know what's going on with the support group, you might want to do feedback. If they're doing well, but you're not noticing any change, and you're noticing, they may be stuck or they're in the same situation or the challenge that created the support group has not been met, then you may want to do a survey. Because now you need data. You need data, you need that information to say, okay, what in this group is missing or what needs to be changed. So I would then get a more detailed survey going. Any other questions? All right, so I am going to move on to the next slide. And this is just some basic information, just a resource, basically talking a little bit about the benefits of support groups through clinical results. This organization said 85% of people who do support groups felt an improved sense of personal value. 77% experienced an improved sense of belonging and connection with their community. 81% reported an improvement of network of friends and personal supports. This is great because I'm going to hit the pause here. Oftentimes, our families, as a family parent advocate, natural supports or even social supports can be a struggle area for some of the families that we're serving. If you are noticing you have a family caregiver that you're working with who has a lack of natural supports or social supports, at that point, I would say a support group would be a great resource for them because of the impact and the benefit of support groups. They may develop new friends and new network with shared interests and like interests that they can now kind of get a little bit more confidence and really expand their perspective and their knowledge of how do I do this? Do I know how to do this? The self-efficacy. Do I know how to do this? Support groups can give you that because even if they're not talking, they're hearing parent A saying, well, my child went through this and these are some of the steps and this is the improvement. Then parent B saying something slightly different, but with the same formula, my child is experiencing this X, which is different, but these are some of the things that I did. And then they can sort of take that collective information and really help build their self-efficacy. So I do want to mention that. And the last one, it says 60% said that GROW, which is the results this is from, had directly contributed to their recovery from mental illness. So we see that based on these results from this particular organization, support groups can give a benefit of way more than 50% of the people in the group. And so they have a track record of really being impactful to the people that we serve. So we are getting towards the end, close to the end. I just wanted to ask you all, what do you feel was your biggest takeaway today? And then there's a little bit more that I'm going to discuss with you. We're not done yet. I'm doing an assessment. So what do you feel is your biggest takeaway from today's topic about support groups? And I would love to hear a little bit from everyone, even if you're in the chat or I love hearing the voices, but if you have to, you can use the chat.
For me, it was just a reminder to utilize the polls and the assessments. I haven't been doing that pretty much since the COVID restrictions were lifted. So to get back to that and to try to see why some of the numbers are dwindling in the groups.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Wendy. Awesome. Because, yeah, sometimes they dwindle and we don't quite know why. And sometimes it's something so simple, so small and insignificant that we just could not see. And they just needed you to pull it out of them. So thank you. Anyone else? Norcia?
How to go about setting up the meetings and how to go about reaching families to get it done.
Okay. So that was your biggest takeaway. What did you learn about setting up the meetings?
Well, you said to do the SNA questions and asks, to the survey, find out what most of the parents have in common, and to see, to have a meeting to make sure they all being there for the same reasons, as in, like you said, 10 out of 2, and everybody else is just like clueless. So basically have the majority of people that stay and just look and make sure everybody gets the information that they need with the amount of numbers that are required.
Thank you. Absolutely. And I'm glad that you were able to pick something out of this that you could take with you. Anyone else wanted to share their biggest takeaway from today? And then I'll go through the chat. Okay, I'm going to read some of what's in the chat. I see Megan says, I want to do a better job of identifying trends in order to make groups relevant and helpful to families. Awesome. Yeah, trending, so identifying the trends, that's like analytical, but it's so helpful. Layla says the group breakdown and about how many to the group. Awesome. Thank you, Layla. Katie says reminders and ideas for support groups. Kylie says learn to give every support group a topic and to take a survey. I'm so sorry. I'm having some trouble reading it. To take a survey at the end. And absolutely. Taza says, I haven't ran a group in my facility and was able to gain knowledge on how to approach. Awesome. I can't wait to hear if you're able to tell me how it went, if and when you finally offer a support group. Marianne says, I would like to hear more about engagement, not as easy as it sounds. Okay, good. So we can definitely do that. I'll talk a little bit about that actually right now. So engagement within hosting the support groups. Some of the things I've noticed that work best is, and I kind of go into this a little bit in every training that we do and every training that we talk about on different platforms, but your questions, the types of questions that you pose as you're leading these workshops, you want to make sure that they are open-ended. You open-ended questions typically start with the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, how. And so how is an H, but it's a 5, you know what I'm talking about. So you kind of want to start with the 5 W's as people are discussing things and you're putting questions out to the group. You kind of want to make it an open-ended question. Who here feels, et cetera, et cetera? How does this impact your family, et cetera, et cetera? You kind of want to pose the questions to the group with these open-ended ones, which allow them to talk more. And that enhances the engagement. Oh, yes. So that enhances the engagement and it really helps for you to pull things out of them so that they can learn from one another and often what is another great tool for the engagement and the interactivity is if someone asks a question, someone within the support group asks a question, you don't have to answer it. This is not like we're not Oprah. This is not the Oprah show. So we don't have to answer the question. The best thing to do oftentimes is say, who has anything to share about that, or who has shared that experience? Allow other people in the support group to contribute their experience to the support group. If they say something that might be a little um risky, then you do want to step in and provide some guidelines to the conversation, some structure to the conversation to make sure that you stay within bounds of what's safe, productive, and informative. But I would always encourage you to allow the support group to work through challenges that they present before you actually say from your experience what it is. This is their space and you're just cultivating it. So you built the playground for them to play in. And this is their gym and you're just the trainer. So let them do it. Let them take this space and work it out and exercise their thoughts, share their thoughts, exercise their skills, build their skills, all of these things, and you're overseeing it as the person leading the support group. I'm going to take the hand from Norcia, and then I'm going to read a couple of things in the chat. Norcia, you can go ahead.
No, I was just saying that it's okay when people are we having these groups. It's okay, if they ask a question or if it's for us not to know the answer or for them not to know the answer. We could always say, I don't have the answer for that, but I will get back to you on that, or you know, just so that they feel that answers are not being answered, and that their voice are being heard.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you, and like you said, and I will build on that just a little bit. If you're not sure how to address something that comes up, you can always just say, let me get the info and follow up with you. So that's absolutely something you can do. And I think it's more productive than being wrong and loud. Which some people like to do, and just saying things because you feel like it needs to be said. No, we can just say, you know what, I'm not sure, but let me look into that. I'll research it. Or you can even give them the tools to research it themselves. And you can say, hey, let's make this a project. Maybe we can come back within a week and see if we find anything on Google. Tell me what you found on that topic. Like there are so many ways that you can kind of go with that without misguiding a participant to the support group. And what I would add to you as well about the engagement and getting people to speak and things is sometimes people will give you a limited answer. Maybe they're not in the mood. Maybe they're just a little checked out. They're overwhelmed. Their executive functioning skills are just at the bare minimum. And they're just like, what? If that does happen, pay attention to the body language that you're seeing in the support group. If it's in person, it's easier to do yes, I know. If it's not, it's so hard. But you can hear certain things. So like if someone is telling a story and they're breaking because it sounds like they're on the verge of crying, this is a good part to pause and practice self-regulation techniques. So like breathing. And it's been identified that practicing the breathing techniques as a group actually makes it more effective than doing it on your own. So you can everybody take a deep breath, we'll inhale to the count of 5, exhale to the count of 5, and then allow them to go back into their story. So it's important to just be mindful of what's happening in the room, reading the room, as the trainer in this gym, reading the room and being mindful of it and saying, okay, this person is starting to look uncomfortable. Maybe we need to hit the pause on this conversation for a second, see how we can kind of co-regulate, bring everybody back, and then we'll go back into it. And a strong icebreaker is always suggested, encouraged, because it really gets people talking about what they're comfortable saying way before we get to them talking about what they're uncomfortable saying. So, like, what's your favorite sitcom, your favorite food, what do you like to do? what is a skill that you have that no one knows? You know, like what's your talent? What's your hidden talent? Any kind of icebreaker question that really helps them to talk about what they like and what they're comfortable about is going to open them up and sort of bring that barrier, that wall down just a bit so that they're even more primed to talk about what may start to be a little heavier. So I hope that answers the question of engagement. Does that help a little? Let me see. I'm going back to the chat to see who asked me that. Marianne, does that help a little?
A little. I think my question was more geared on getting them to the group.
Okay, so like to participate, to actually show up to the support group?
Correct.
Okay, so with that, I would focus on incentives. And so the incentives could be if transportation, I'm not sure where you're located, so it can vary greatly depending on the region. But if they're having trouble with transportation, you know, then the incentive could be something like if you're in like a city region, like maybe like New York City downstate, a Metro card, a round trip Metro card, if they're able to show up to the support group. This way they don't have to come out of pocket to do it. Oftentimes organizations will be able to cover it with like wraparound funds, and things like that. Incentive, like I said, could be snacks or food to get them to come out. The incentive can also be if there's a way, this is really hard, so I'm not saying that you should get this done, but if they have children, somebody to be able to kind of keep an eye on the kids and do coloring or an activity with them so that they don't have to worry about childcare to make it to the support group. Those are some things that can help. And does anyone else have any suggestions about ways that that anyone can really engage people to come, ideas that you see have worked for you in the past on getting people to come to your support group?
I was going to say, Crystal, some people are very, they'll most likely show what they know. They'll get something like a certificate of completion. So depending on what it is, could be anger management, could be something like this. But if there's a completion, usually that could be utilized in a multitude of ways. Could go for the education, or if they're in this line of work, for more credentialing stuff. So if they could also see that they're gaining more than just someone talking to them and sharing information, they might be more inclined to show up.
Absolutely. That's true for sure. If there's some like recognition of their efforts and a reward at the end that they can get, certification, a certificate. Some organizations I've seen them offer like an Amazon gift card. At the end, at the end of this, you can get, etc. Those are some of the things that really help prompt people to come out. So I would encourage all of you to try to identify incentives that are within means for you and your organization that work.
I think if I can just add in, I've been doing this a long time, and my group is actually pretty good right now. I think to start a group, you really have to have a group. Like when I started my group, I had another FPA with me. I had an FPA I knew from another agency pop in. They each tried to bring like one person. And then like after a while, they were able to drop out. But like to have a group with nobody, like it's very hard to do. Like you kind of have to have a few key people that you know will just like show up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Building that audience, the attendance is very hard. That's one of the things most people struggle with the most with their support groups is getting people to show up. So you bring up a really important and prevalent point that, yeah, sometimes you have to have the people to have the people, and if you don't have the people generating that audience is really tricky. But I would say consistency with the outreach will help. It might not show an immediate change, but overall, over time, I should say, you will start seeing more people will begin to pick up on it. They can call in, they can ask questions, and particularly join. As long as you have at least three or more, then you'll be able to run a support group. But you're absolutely right; it can be very hard. It's easier said than done. Easier said than done. I do see Layla asks, having guest speakers have a better turnout? You can have guest speakers. The only thing I would say is to just be mindful that once you start introducing elements like guest speakers, it starts to turn more into a workshop, which is actually a slightly different thing. So a workshop is more of an educational tool. It's like a vehicle to teach someone something, whereas a support group is a place where they can have a safe space to discuss feelings, emotions, challenges that they're experiencing. So I would just be careful with introducing like things like guest speakers and things like that, because then you don't want to turn it into something else, because people could potentially shut down, because support groups usually stay the same up until the end. And so because it's like what do they say? The Vegas rules apply here. What happens in the support group stays in the support group. So introducing new people and bringing them out or things like that, it could throw off the people in the group. So I would just be careful. There are ways to do it, but I would just be mindful of how you're doing it, who you're bringing in, and making sure you're checking with your group members to see how comfortable they are with that. And then Marianne says we have a guest speaker once a month, occasionally a door prize. Awesome. Okay. So the guest speaker, if it's working well with you that you have a guest speaker at your support groups, then, and also because it's so consistent, then they're more comfortable and prepared with this person coming in. I would say that is definitely beneficial. Any further questions about support groups, attendance, or getting them to show up or things like that? So before we start to wrap, there's one final element that I just wanted to bring up, and that is potential conflict. So with a support group, as you're having all of these different personalities come together, there is the potential that there can be some level of conflict that can arise. And there are a few ways that you can address that, which is like I mentioned earlier, hitting the pause, paying attention to the body language and the things that are happening within the room, making sure that you're identifying if, fists are becoming more clenched, like they're becoming more tense, is what I mean by that. If a speaker is becoming more tense, a speaker becomes, a little uncomfortable. You want to make sure you are proactive about experiences, feelings, and potential outbursts instead of reactive. So we want to get ahead of them. And that's why we're paying close attention to the participants that we are dealing with. I see in the chat, someone says, the overtalker. Yeah. So there are overtalkers. There's a little phrase that some people use when they open up either if it's a facilitated workshop or it's a support group, they have the rule of make space, take space. So make space, take space. I don't know if any of you have already heard of it. As a matter of fact, if anyone has heard of it, why don't you tell us what make space, take space is? Because I'm doing all the talking now and I'm gonna give it to you. Anyone heard of make space, take space? And do you want to tell me what it means? I don't see any hands or any unmuted mics yet, but basically make space, take space means make space is try not to be too quiet. Take, if well, okay, sorry. Take space is try not to be too quiet. So if you're taking space, you're basically making your voice heard, putting your thoughts out there. You don't want to just be too laid back in the conversation, because that minimal level of engagement can sometimes, you can kind of drift away from what's happening. You can be very disassociated from what's happening in front of you. And so we encourage those to take space. Make space is the opposite. If you are a stronger participant, you're somebody who likes to jump in and say things, and you got a lot, that's on your mind, and that's as wonderful as it is. We want to make sure that we're making space for other individuals who might have something to share, but maybe their response time is just a little slower. They want to think about it before they say it, or they want to get a chance to kind of, phrase it differently or whatever. There are some people who respond at different times. you want to make space for others to be able to speak as well. So make space, take space. Take up the space to say something, make space for others to say something. One shouldn't lead more. And so make space, take space is something that is often used, and I encourage you to use it in your support groups as well. That's the phrasing of the terminology, and you can just say it directly, explain it to them, and they'll understand. And often when you go over the house rules of what's to be expected, people often respect them. Okay. So are there any further questions from anyone about anything we've discussed today? We went through a lot of material. How does everyone feel? How do you feel about support groups after what we've discussed and what we've learned today? Okay, I see in the chat, Marianne says it's informative. Thank you, Marianne, and thank you for your participation. You've brought some great insight to the conversation. Megan says thank you. You're welcome. I'm not going to read all the thank yous because we could probably have a few, but if there's no further questions and everyone is feeling pretty squared away, I'm going to pass it back to TJ.
Well, thank you again, everybody, for coming to participate in Crystal's TA call. I know a few of us actually had to leave. I was going to throw in for next TA call will be we're going to do professionalism as an FPA, and I will be doing that workshop. That's going to be October 18th, same time, third Friday of the month. Let me think. Yeah, any questions or comments before we let everybody go? Well, without further ado, we will not keep you, and I hope everyone has a